Hello, hi. Now, as part of the Terrible Tyranid collection, I've been theming my Tyranids around various things from different IPs in order to gain inspiration for the colours. Now, this one's not going to be themed around something, but instead themed around a set of paints. People really liked the Halo video, and part of the reason why is because of this guy who looks really cool, and I was super happy with him. And that's mostly because he uses a color shift paint on his carapace to make it look like sci-fi armor. Now, if I want to recreate this guy, I have other color shift colors which I can use. So here's some more. Now, I've got 3 that I'm going to be using. I later found out that I had a couple more, but I guess I can save them for another day. But these are the 3 I'm going to go with. So, going from right to left, we have Green Stuff World's Toxic Purple. I've used this one before. It was gifted to me by a friend, so it's like the old formula. Then you've got Pinky Blue, which is a color shift metal. That's like the newer version of their color shifts, so it's different, and I've only used it once, and I don't quite know how to get like it to look good, so we'll see how that one goes. And then the next one is a Vallejo paint. It was Orange Violet. I literally just used this to it was like £2, and it like made like free shipping available, so I just used it to get free shipping. I've never used it. I actually almost threw it out with the box when the delivery came because I forgot I got it. So yeah, hopefully it's alright. I don't know. So to get started with these paints, you have to paint it black first, and then put gloss paint over the top of that, and then you can finally put the effect color on. This is pretty much the only way to do it. I've tried to do it without these steps, but it just doesn't look as good, or just straight up doesn't show up. Without it being on black paint, it just, like, you can barely tell that it's on the model itself. These 3 steps aren't the most interesting things, so I'm pretty much gonna skip any and all footage, simply because there's not much point in watching it. I paint it black, and then I paint it glossy, and then we'll get to the effect paints. The main thing with effect paints is that they have a lot of stuff inside of them. This one's been sat around for years at this point, so it's all clogged up. Now, I've got these little drill things. I'm gonna stick that down the end to try and kind of open it up. In the end, I give up on that as well. I take the top off and just dip my brush into the top of the thing, because the nozzle was absolutely clogged up, and the moment I like open it back up, it gets clogged up again. So yeah, I think I've just got to pull the top off every time I want to use it. So when I was given this, I was given also the best advice to use them, which was to use it straight out of the bottle, don't try and thin it, and then also apply several thin coats. And that it was much better out of an airbrush, which, to be honest, it is. However, the Green Stuff World formula isn't great to get out once it dries. So it's not been the best experience doing that either. And to be honest, it went fairly well. It's quite nice. It's really satisfying to do, especially because it's like a white liquid on the palette, and as you brush it on, it turns purple. It's kind of like a little bit of magic. This particular paint is purple and green, or at least, well, yeah, it is mostly purple, and then it looks kind of green in specific lighting conditions, which is really cool. It's very spooky. Personally, I think of like a lot of different models that would benefit from this, but I've kind of shied away from using these color shift kind of paints just because it's a little tedious. Now, next up is the Pinky Blue, which is the newer formula, and I think I can notice quite a bit of a difference between these guys. This one either was much better shaken up than the other one, but this just went on a lot worse. Now, it was kind of clumpy. There was way too much that kind of got left on the thing. I was trying to do thin coats, but because it's got like this like plastic residue, which is how it does the color thingy. Yep, I'm going with that. The color thingy. So when the color thingy happens is because loads of little like plastic fibers in the paint. But occasionally they kind of clump up, and it makes kind of like a patchy kind of like, it's not very like satisfying, and that's the main problem I had with this guy. It doesn't help that like I put it on this style of Tyranid. This style of Tyranid has like a much more complicated carapace, which gave it plenty of opportunities to kind of get stuck on like edges and like some of the flat bits and the curves, which was an absolute pain. But I really like how this one looks. If it's done well, this wasn't done well. I suspect it's actually meant to be thinned down. Maybe people were thinning down the old formula and having terrible results, so then they made a new formula that can be thinned down, or is supposed to be thinned down, because people are used to thinning their paints when they put things on things. I don't know. Now, the last one to do is this Vallejo paint. It's very similar to the first Toxic Purple, in the way that it goes on pretty well, unthinned, but it does require a lot of thin coats. I did 4 coats to get to the final amount. It still could have done with more. I just kind of gave up by 4. I figured that like it should be fine by that point, and it wasn't really. A big kind of like thing with this was that it was like coming out the medium was separating from like the little plastic pieces more often than I would have liked. I felt like every single time I was doing a layer, I was also mixing the paint on the palette, just to make sure that all of the particles were there, because you can see it separating. If you leave it for about 5 minutes, it's back to being like the grey medium on top, and yeah, that's not really what you want, but I like the colour. Now, when it came to the individual layers, the Toxic Purple I did 3 coats of, the Pinky Blue I did 2 coats of, and the Vallejo Orangey Violet. The Vallejo Orangey, the Orangey, nope. I did 4 coats of the Orangey Violet, there we go. Now, here's the thing. I've done the thing that I set out to do, right? I have 3 special carapaces, and that's what I set out to do. And now I've got to ask the question, what do now? Because I have no clue. I've got to work it out, I guess. So here's the plan, right? It's basically like a free space, because I don't have a reason to do anything with these guys after doing this. So my plan is to dilute the Pinky Blue. I don't think it looks that good, and it loses all kind of form of shading. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna like varnish it with a slightly like darkened varnish, in the same way that I would apply shadows using like a very thin speed paint, and hopefully that should provide some better effect. Then I've just got to find some fun colors and finally just experiment and have fun with them. Like, this is just kind of like research and development, so I don't expect them to look great. I just want to see if I can make them look cool. So this shadowy glossy varnish is pretty straightforward. I've just mixed together Gravelord Grey, a little bit of speed paint, and then the glossy varnish to hopefully, yeah. Now, I don't know if this is going to destroy the effect or not, so it's a little bit 50-50 as to whether or not this ends up looking good, but we'll find out in a second, I guess. Experimenting. And ta-da! Yeah, I just skipped it. It was pretty boring. But here's what it looks like. It did destroy the effect a little bit. It now looks just kind of like regular metal. But there is a little bit of effect. If you go looking for it, you can find it. It looks slightly off to what you expect most metals to look like, or metallic paints to look like, which is kind of cool. But it doesn't stick out as much as it used to, which I guess is to be expected. I guess. Now, when it comes to the skin color, I want to try something different. Now, I know that red plus blue equal purple, but what does a red base coat plus a blue wash equal? I'm hoping something cool, but equally it could be something terrible, and that's why I want to find out. I think this is the perfect opportunity to kind of, yeah. The goal of this is to see what two primary colors do when they're painted over the top of each other in the form of a base coat and a wash. Now, in theory, it should result in some purpley colors. It might be completely overwritten by the blue, which is why I'm also thinning down the blue with a little bit of this opaque wash as well as speed paint medium. This should help it kind of look bluer, because I'm kind of scared that the red's going to take over. I'm really unsure about how the result's gonna go, so let's watch. So the red did take on a much more purpley tone, despite being majority red, and then the recesses went this kind of bright blue as if it had no effect with the underneath color, which to be honest is kind of to be expected, but I think it would look a lot better if I then painted over some of the highlights as red, making it look kind of like Spider-Man. Yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with this either. Now, there is a, there's a Dota 2 character called, I think, Weaver or Reaver. That's a red and blue. He is on my list of things that I kind of wanted to do Tyranids around. This is kind of it though. I probably wouldn't. I can guess I can kind of tick him off the list. It's weird. I'm not sure where I would use this on a serious model, but it is however quite interesting, I think. So after going crazy with that one, I've kind of brought it back a little bit. Now, the goal with this one is to do almost like a two-color kind of monotone. We have the color shift metal as a orange and pinky kind of purple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make kind of like a yellowy orange blend into kind of a red. This should have a very similar spectrum to this to this metal, which could look really cool. Now, I don't know, monotone kind of models are kind of like, I don't know, frowned upon. I'm hoping maybe this would look actually really cool, because it's focused around the color shift kind of metal. Now, the way I'm doing the blending is just painting over mostly with one color, and then whilst it's still wet, painting over with another. This should provide like an efficient blend. I don't want it to go fully into the red, which is just leftover red from painting the other guy. As the main inspiration behind that is that I had leftover paint still on the palette. Now when I say monotone, I don't really mean monotone. There's obviously more than one color. It's just kind of like a limited color palette. Really, this is only going to be two colors, so I guess it's a bitonal, yeah, I think this is a bitonal paint job. Now, in order to make this kind of more of that kind of like orange and purple, as opposed to this orange and pink, I'm gonna make kind of like a purpley wash to go over it. This should hopefully just kind of fill the recesses with this purplishness and give it kind of almost like a peach fuzz kind of like effect to it, which kind of makes this design like on brand with my like channel's color scheme. I have this kind of like pinky orangey yellow as like kind of one of the main bits of my channel. So this does kind of make this like my channel themed design. I think that's kind of interesting. I think that's kind of cool. Yeah. The end result is actually like a really nice kind of vibrant skin tone. I'm super happy with how this looks. Like, I think I got the amount of pigment in that wash like almost perfect. It hasn't taken away too much from the color. It's kind of made it a little bit less saturated, which is to be expected. It would kind of like neutralize the yellowy colors, as well as some of like the more aggressive reds as well. So yeah, it's a little bit lower saturation than what it was, but the kind of like purpley recesses are insanely cool. Now for the second one, I also decided to go down the theming of kind of one of the colors of the color shift. This one's going to be a green and light green kind of color blend going through, which should look good, and then it'll be like the literal definition of monotone when the light's perfect. Otherwise, then it'll be like a bicolor, which will then look kind of cool. I think that's kind of like a good idea. I don't know. It's an excuse to kind of like, I've got jade. I don't get like enough opportunities to use jade. I quite like it as a color scheme, which makes it fun. Yeah, and then it kind of goes into just like a regular kind of like grassy green, just to give it some contrast, and it looks really nice. Just to kind of go along with that like toxic purple. This is a very like toxic Tyranid, which is good fun. Now, after doing a really nice blend job, I put a blue wash over it. I thought this might be really cool. Jade is already like a bluer green, so why not kind of make it all kind of bluer green? Unfortunately, although I diluted this about as much as I normally do, blue is very highly pigmented. It's probably like the strongest speed paint, at least in my opinion. It seems to just go a bit crazy, and I just committed to it. I probably should have diluted it more. And yeah, so now it's bright blue. It wasn't supposed to be bright blue. It's supposed to be green. But yeah, you know, sometimes you do things and then you regret it immediately. Okay, so I kind of messed up. I can't seem to find the footage. I've lost it. And I can re-record the turntable, but I can't re-record the steps to get to the turntable because I've done it. So we're just gonna skip ahead. Ta-da! Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. But this is these guys done. They do actually look pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with them. Yeah, they ended up being all right. I didn't really know much with this one. This is already like an almost 20-minute video, so I'm kind of glad that maybe I've skipped a bit. Yeah, the final results, I think they're pretty cool. I think the orange and pink one, probably the best of the three. The red and blue one, not great, and then the toxic purple is kind of like, it's okay. Yeah, like I quite like the skin. I just think maybe like the purple armor is a bit like boring. It could have benefited from just maybe just like toxic green armor. That might have been better. Yeah, no. These are three actually quite interesting to look at, even if they're not like. I don't think I would want an army of any of these three. But as an individual one, they're pretty cool. When it comes to kind of like the armor on the like Spider-Man-y one, I quite like it. You can barely see the effect, but it does just look like a kind of like a generic metal. I think that's maybe why I actually quite like it. It's enough that if you get it from like the right angle, you're like, oh, that's a bit weird. Now, I don't think it necessarily fits the skin that goes along with it. If I had kind of known like this was going to be the end result of what this looked like, instead of red I maybe would have gone with pink, and instead of blue I would have gone with like green. Now I think that would be like a really good color combo to go with this kind of pinky blue. I just think it would look really, really interesting. But I didn't do that, so I guess we're stuck with this one. I can't help but feel a little bit biased. I quite like this one. It's the color scheme that I quite like to do. Pinky, yellowy, orange is always gonna be like a fun color combo for me. And I really like how this one goes. I think the skin looks like skin, which is something that I kind of like struggle to do with these guys, especially with custom colors. Skin is a pretty complicated subject, so I'm pretty happy that he's come out as good as he has. I feel like with a lot of these designs, the skin doesn't always look as good as it could do, which is why I'm super happy with this. I'm not a huge fan of the armor on this one specifically. I think it's because the skin looks as good as it does. I think it could have benefited from a more kind of like biological looking armor. It would read much better with the design as a whole. But I started with the armor and then made the skin around it, so it's kind of my fault. And then last but not least, the toxic purple one. It's one of the rare cases where I think it genuinely looks better on the camera than in real life. For whatever reason, like the dry brush of bright green looks almost like spectral on this one here, but it doesn't look like it in real life. It's really kind of like dull and kind of like monotone. So yeah, I'm glad it looks better on camera. I think the skin could have done with a lot of work. I already mentioned that I should have thinned down the wash significantly more. I think it would have looked substantially better if it was like that. But I'm at least happy how it looks on camera. I think it looks pretty good. Yeah, I think the claws kind of help with the fluorescent claws. Once again, like maybe purple armor wasn't the best for it. I genuinely like it when it's in the light where it looks more green than purple, which is, yeah. So that's these guys done. Now, what I've kind of learned from this is that even despite doing this, I still can't think of like a good use case for these custom like two-tone metallics. Like, these guys look okay, but I ended up preferring the skin, which was just kind of like an experimental practice session, and I prefer that over the fancy shiny armor. Now, if I had done more boring skin, maybe that would be a completely different story, but I don't think all of these would have gone well with just kind of like a boring skin, which is kind of like the catch-22. Like, they look good, but they need something to go with it, and then there's nothing that can really go with it because it doesn't really work. But you also can't really do much with it. It's kind of like one coat and then it's fine. Like, I tried painting over it with the thinnest of washes and it almost completely got rid of the special effect. So you can't change much of it, you can't adjust any of it, you can't add shadows. It's kind of like you just put it on and then it looks good, I guess. And that's the whole thing. I don't really know what else do you do with it. And I've come to that conclusion. Despite that was the conclusion I had before I made these guys. So clearly this went well. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please stick around, like if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one.